even by the unusual standards of the Trump administration, which are markedly unusual, to say the least. The events of the past week have been head-spinning. First, the president made the rounds at the G20 summit, where his daughter Ivanka was, for some reason, front and center just about everywhere the most powerful leaders in the world turned. Then there was his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, which was full of banter about election interference, including Trump apparently lightheartedly asking Putin not to meddle this time around.
I did say it, and we had a discussion. We had a great discussion, President Putin and myself. I thought it was really a tremendous discussion.
But then to add another tremendous discussion to the mix, there was the surprise field trip Trump took to the DMZ, making him the first ever sitting president to do so, to continue talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Now the New York Times is reporting the U.S. is considering a so-called nuclear freeze, meaning we just accept the North as a nuclear power. And to cap it all off, there was today's announcement that Iran has surpassed the limits that were set on its nuclear fuel stockpile in a 2015 deal, which Trump pulled out of last year. That announcement coming just over a week after the president said he called off an airstrike in Iran, which was supposed to be in response to an unmanned U.S. drone being shot down. So is there a method to any of this madness, or is it all yet more proof of a chaotic White House that prizes personal promotion above all else? Joining me are Carol Savitz and Jim Walsh, Senior Advisor and Senior Research Associate, respectively, at MIT's Security Studies program. Jim has also been involved in past nuclear discussions in Iran and North Korea. Thank you both for being here.
Good to be here.
All right, we got to move fast here. Carol, what was your reaction when you learned that the president was headed to the DMZ?
I wasn't surprised, but I was shocked. I mean, I think it's grandstanding in a way, and with the tweet to Kim Jong-un to please come join me and meet me there, I mean, he loves being the first at anything, and it was a great photo op. We have to see if it actually leads to anything. I was almost surprised that they then announced that there would be lower-level ongoing negotiations, because that's sort of unlike Trump. Trump's always, I can negotiate, I know everything. And so the fact that they may be sort of, allocating this to the specialists is actually hopeful, I think.
Oh, interesting. That's a gloss I haven't heard before. Was your take similar to Carol's?
I agree. I think the context was that things were headed downhill. Right after the failed Hanoi summit, you have an angry Kim stewing in a long train ride back to North Korea. There were no talks, no discussions whatsoever, and Kim was hinting that he would restart missile and nuclear tests at the beginning of the year. I think, to the extent that face matters, and there's, big cultural debates about that, Trump inviting Kim to meet with him, going to his place, as it were, right, and crossing into North Korea, which no sitting president had ever done, that created the possibility that there could be momentum going forward. But obviously the track record isn't very good. We've had these big moments and then they've been followed by nothing. But yes, Carol is right. If we're going to make any progress here, it's going to be through working group meetings and the hard work of diplomacy.
So I guess that take that you guys share, which I find hopeful and optimistic, it raises the question of whether when President Trump does something like this, is he thinking in the back of his mind or in any conscious way whatsoever, by allowing Kim to save some face, I'm going to make it possible to restart negotiations in a moment when things have been going in the wrong direction? Or is this simply him doing what he does instinctively, looking for a way to be unprecedented, to sort of conduct diplomacy as a reality TV show, and there happens to be an ancillary benefit, but not by any design of his? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I've never met the man. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think both are possible. I think that maybe somebody whispered in his ear, maybe we need to get things started again, because as Jim just said, it's been going downhill. On the other hand, I think it was all instinct and all, oh, let's do this. I think it would be a hoot to do this. And no, I'm serious. I'm going to be the first sitting president to step into the DMZ, and I think that it's a photo op. I mean, that's been the criticism of all of the talks, that he's given away much more than he's ever gotten in return from the North Koreans.
What do I think is in his mind?
Yeah.
Me. I think he thinks about him, how this all makes him look. I don't like drawing that conclusion, but we have 2.5 years of evidence here, and it sure seems to me, of amongst your choices, it's not about strategy. I don't think he has a strategic bone in his body. He says he goes from his gut. He says he's a counterpuncher, judged by his own words. This is not about policy.
Right.
It's not about party. It's about personality.
In that case, I guess another big question is, all right, if he's just acting instinctively and is driven to a large extent by ego and a desire to be first, then who are the people who happen to have his ear with any particular situation at any given point in time when it comes to how a situation might be leveraged? I want to read the tweet that John Bolton, his national security advisor, sent after the New York Times reported, as we mentioned earlier, that a nuclear freeze is a possibility with North Korea, keeping its nukes but not creating any new ones. Bolton tweeted, "I read this New York Times story with curiosity. Neither the NSC staff nor I have discussed or heard of any desire to settle for a nuclear freeze by North Korea. This was a reprehensible attempt by someone to box in the president. There should be consequences." Of course, John Bolton wasn't there for the DMZ trip. He was, I think, in Mongolia, spending some time in Ulaanbaatar, if I'm saying it right. So is John Bolton out of the loop on North Korea? Safe assumption?
I think so. I think that's good old bureaucratic infighting. And the phrasing is perfect. He says, "No one told me about it." So, you know.
But you also have to wonder, because it comes on the heels of the reports that Trump at the last minute decided to pull back the strike against the Iranians.
You're perfectly anticipating where we're going with
I'm
this.
sorry, I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
But, you know, Bolton, again, he decided Bolton was sort of too hot-headed, and he decided to listen to other people instead of John Bolton. So the fact that John Bolton was not at the DMZ really doesn't surprise me.
So if it's not Bolton, then who, when it comes to Iran, which we'll get to in a moment, but when it comes to North Korea, who is nudging in some way the president toward what might ultimately be a more dovish approach?
You know,
is it Ivanka and Jared? Is it Mike Pompeo?
I have a hypothesis that's going to put me way out.
Okay.
I'm wondering if it's not Vladimir Putin. I am very suspicious, and this may be my own sort of paranoia or something. There are no longer readouts when Trump talks to other world leaders. We only hear about a few of the phone calls between him and Vladimir Putin. I have to and he saw Putin before he went to the DMZ. I'm wondering if Putin isn't saying to him, "Hey, I have this idea," because the Russians have talked about this before as a way of moving things forward. Now, maybe I'm being too conspiratorial and too Kremlinological,
well,
and I apologize.
That we're in.
But it's crazy. I mean,
do you buy Carol's? I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory because
I mean, in general, I agree with both what you're saying. I guess I would offer a slightly different categorization. I think John Bolton is still a player. I think he has yet to exercise influence. He's most likely to be able to do that on Iran rather than North Korea. The president wants to be tough on Iran, and he wants to be soft on North Korea, so he's going to listen to the advisors that tell him what he wants to hear at that moment. Now, I don't know whether this is true or not, but for people who have worked in the White House, it is sometimes said that they worry about who's the last person who spoke to the president.
Right.
So I think it's not as categorical, it's more
Well, there
random.
is some reason to, I mean, I think back to that remarkable photo op after he sat down with President Obama, where he kept talking about what great chemistry he had with President Obama, who he had just spoken with. So given that a week and a half ago, it seemed like we were on the verge of military conflict with Iran, maybe a limited strike, maybe something more, given that Bolton may be out of the loop on North Korea, but maybe not on Iran, now that Iran has passed that nuclear threshold that was set in the deal that we have since opted out of, are you concerned that we're going to tiptoe right up to the edge of a military clash again?
Oh, yeah. I've been predicting this for over a year, and everything, you know, not everything I've said, but a good piece of it has turned out to be true because, you know, we had this stuff today is minor stuff. They're not getting a nuclear weapon because of what happened today. But in another week, on July 7th, they'll announce that they're going to increase their levels of enrichment.
That's a whole other ballgame, completely.
And they'll start doing more and more, stepping back, promising to come back into it if things change. But nevertheless, sort of step by step, each step a little more significant, starting to back away from the deal, which it's their right to do so. They're not obliged to stay in a deal that we
pulled
killed.
out of.
Right.
Absolutely.
All right. Despite all of our best efforts, we are running short on time. So I want to skip over Trump joking about meddling with President Putin, which was a remarkable moment. Oh, yeah, don't meddle in our elections. And I want to talk briefly about Ivanka being everywhere at the G20. She was also at the DMZ, introduced along with Mike Pompeo by the president as Beauty and the Beast. Carol, you get the last word here today. Is she playing a big part in American diplomacy right now?
It looks as if he's setting her up to be playing a big role in American diplomacy. Whether or not she, you know, I guess one thing could be, is she going to be the next Deputy Secretary of State or Deputy Assistant Secretary, God forbid, or something like that? But it looks as if he's setting her up for a much more prominent role. And that scene, the French video of her, you know, walking up to and interrupting a conversation among, I think it was Macron, May and Christine Lagarde, and changing the subject completely leads you to wonder what exactly she really knows.
Maybe UN Security Council.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's another possibility.
Unfortunately, we got to leave it there, but this was a pleasure. Jim Walsh, Carol Savitz, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.